Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to hang up and just make sure that the three of us can hear each other. Okay. All right. Let me test that out, and I'll give you a call back if we cannot. Okay? Uh-huh. Bye-bye. All right. Can you... Hi, Ed.
Hi. Can you hear me now? No.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
I can't hear you.
Do you have your volume turned up on your
Brian,
computer?
what do you think?
Can you hear me, Mom?
Can you think of anything we can do?
Mm-hmm.
And what is that?
I'm going to type it into the text.
Okay, you're going to type something in and tell me. But Ed, I think you can hear me, and Brian, I think you can hear me. Okay. All right. While you're working on that, Brian, this is what Eric said. He ran into some snafu. So we're not going to get to see the live stream. Is your speaker set as your default audio? It's set to the headset. Should I pull it out?
Yeah.
That make a difference?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
You know what? On Zoom, that's a help. See, I've never done Google Meet before. I've only done Zoom, and on Zoom the headset is.
No, she's not synced.
Huh?
Now you're not synced. Your lips are moving and saying one thing, and your sound is another, which is not that important. We can hear what you're saying.
Well, Ed, it's nice to meet you after
Oh,
all of this.
you're okay now. You're okay now. She's not synced.
All right, and this is our son Brian. Maybe you two have been
Now you're
chatting.
not synced. Your
We are able to hear each other.
Okay. All right. Good.
Did you just now hear me?
I can. Ed, you can hear Brian, right?
I can hear everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good.
Oh,
All right.
wow.
Huh? Oh, there's Lonnie. That's my husband. Say hello to Ed.
Hi, Lonnie.
Hello, Ed. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Dad.
Okay. All right. So what Eric's going to do is he's recording this. He's going to record the live stream, or which is no longer a live stream, what happens there in California. And then he's going to combine them and then publish a video later today. So we'll be able to see the whole thing.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Anyway, well, so my welcome originally was going to be for everybody that was there and live streaming, but I can from California, Texas, North Carolina, and Virginia, but I won't have to bother reading the welcome right now. So if you two will indulge me, I'll go ahead and read what I had prepared for what I thought would be for all of us together. Okay?
Yeah, but won't it be if you do it? Won't it be on the? It'll not be recorded now. If you just do it for us, you're not going to do it.
Well, Eric's recording it now.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Yeah, he's recording it. So he's been recording everything we've been saying. So
Okay.
I'm sure he's going to cut that.
All right, good.
And by the way, again, I'm so glad that the hurricane is no longer a threat for you, Ed.
Yeah, so are we. So are we.
Mom,
Real happy.
Mom, you may want to consider reading the intro anyway, since he's recording it. He might be able to use it with the.
Oh,
That was my
okay.
point.
All right, I'll read the whole thing. Good morning, or perhaps good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm David's younger sister, Evelyn Thomas, and on behalf of Jane, David's wife, his son Eric, and his granddaughter Delilah. I want to welcome all of you to this celebration of David's life. Welcome to those of you who are present in person, and welcome to those of you who are live streaming from California, Texas, North Carolina, and Virginia. We are grateful that you are with us and look forward to all of us being comforted as we remember David, sharing our thoughts and stories about him. This wonderful man with a zest for life, an insatiable curiosity, a generous spirit, and a compassionate heart. I have so many wonderful memories of David that it is hard to decide which ones to tell you about. One memory just led to another. Here are a few snapshots of our life together. David Richard Strauss, husband, father, grandfather, uncle, educator, musician, world traveler, veteran, sports enthusiast, gourmet cook, philosopher, lover of puns, loyal friend, my big brother. David and I grew up in small towns in eastern Pennsylvania. The first place I remember us living was a little more than an intersection. We lived in a big stone house attached to the general store owned by my Uncle Luke and Aunt Esther, and they lived in an apartment above the store. It was near the end of World War II, a time when coupons were needed to purchase sugar and gas, and when blackout curtains were drawn at the sound of the air raid siren. However, for us, those were happy days of freely roaming around the neighborhood and safely exploring the countryside. Unfortunately, while living there, our parents divorced and life changed. Mom got a job teaching, and the three of us moved to a farm out in the country, close to the town where she would be teaching. We didn't do the farm work, only rented half of the farmhouse. But we again had the opportunity to roam unhindered to scope out the new territory with its fields and nearby stream. David was the adventurous one. I merely tagged along. We finally moved into town to a row house along a main street, and life in the city began. I couldn't have asked for a better big brother. He always wanted to take care of me. I think because our father left us when we were young, David was only 7 or 8. David thought it was his job to watch out for me and protect me. He was very kind to me, including me in whatever he was up to. When he was in high school, instead of seeing me as the bratty little sister, which I probably was, he took me along with him and his buddies when they went out on their adventures. Now, who does that? David loved to drive, and drive fast. One of his favorite things to do was to go speeding along the backcountry roads, seeing how fast he could take the curves, while I held my breath in the back seat. He was also a spur-of-the-moment kind of guy. In the summer, he would wake me up out of a sound sleep and say, "Let's go to the shore." And off we would go for a day of fun in Ocean City, New Jersey. And it was well worth the trip, despite the long hours crawling home in the heavy traffic in a very hot, unair-conditioned car. Being with David meant having fun and new experiences. When he was 16, he was given a record player. Although he was always interested in music and was a faithful member of the high school band, this gift allowed him to choose his own music, and his lifelong love affair with jazz began. His first purchase was Stan Kenton's City of Glass, which he played over and over. Much to my distress, it didn't sound like music to me. It sounded like glass breaking, but David loved it. However, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. David was no saint. He would tease me, chase me with some wiggly creature, or try to get me into trouble. I remember the time when I was about 4 years old. He said he would pay me a quarter if I would say "damn it" 3 times. And at that time, a quarter was a lot of money to a little kid. Not knowing it was considered a bad word, I innocently said, "Damn it," 3 times and asked for my quarter. But David and his friends just laughed, and I didn't get my quarter. That was not okay with me. So I set off to find Mom and tell her that David didn't pay me my quarter. Well, you know who got into trouble. Or there was the time when Mom was in the hospital overnight for a minor procedure, and David thought that would be a great time to call his band friends to come to our house for a party and jam session. Apparently, the woman down the street didn't have the good sense to appreciate the music, and the police arrived to break up the concert. After graduation from high school, David joined the Navy and was off to see the world. Fortunately, his first ship did enable him to do just that, as it stopped at many ports, all new to David. That was the good news. The bad news was he got very seasick. So as soon as he could, he left the Navy and joined the Army instead. That worked out much better for him. He was assigned to an Army band to play his French horn. During that time, while living in Germany and France, he made lifelong friends and met the love of his life, a DoD English teacher named Jane, whom he married while living in France. In the summers, David and Jane would drive all over Europe in their VW bus, and his love of driving continued as they participated in road rallies. After he left the service, he earned his PhD and began his career as an educator, and embarked on a long, happy, meaningful life, raising Eric and being closely involved in the life of Delilah. David was very generous and loved to give gifts. When he and Jane would go on vacation, he would always send something to us which was a specialty of the area: coffee from Hawaii, cheese from Wisconsin, or, so like David, a 10-pound Ghirardelli chocolate bar from San Francisco. We also received numerous baseball hats and T-shirts, and every year for my birthday, a package would arrive with a surprise gift from my thoughtful, kind big brother. After the 4 of us, David, Jane, my husband Lonnie, and I, retired, David and Jane graciously and generously invited us to vacation with them, making it possible for us to visit fabulous places we never would have seen on our own. All we had to do was show up. They were excellent tour guides, showing us the sights, and they were also terrific gourmet cooks, preparing delicious dinners at the condo with the food specialties of the area. I told them it was my job to appreciate the fine cooking. We also went to visit them at their home in Arcadia. I remember one visit with great fondness. It was time for the Rose Parade. Through a friend and neighbor, David arranged for us to get a special tour of the preparation of the floats, up close and personal on the ground floor with the volunteers. We even got to put flowers placed in small glass vials filled with water on an actual float, one for each of our children and grandchildren. The next day, we enjoyed the beautiful parade from bleachers they had gotten for us. What a great view! The Rose Parade had long been mandatory viewing for me on New Year's Day, so all of that was a real treat for me. That year, USC was playing Penn State in the Rose Bowl. Being an avid USC fan, David entered the lottery for tickets and amazingly won 2 tickets. So he and Lonnie attended. Their seats were high up in the noisy stands, so when they couldn't see or hear what happened, David would call Jane, who was watching at home, to find out what was going on. By the way, USC won. Most of the time as adults, we lived on the other side of the ocean from each other or the other side of the country. So these times together are very treasured memories. Jane took wonderful care of all those he loved. We remember how tenderly he took care of Jane as her memory began to disappear. First for years at home, and then finding a place for her at Sunrise, where she receives excellent care. He visited her as often as he could, taking her gifts and clothing he had chosen for her. Earlier this year, one of those gifts was a ceramic rose in a bud vase for Valentine's Day. His love for her remained strong. In recent years, after Jane went to live at Sunrise, David came to visit us here in Williamsburg, and we enjoyed each other's company and eating seafood. Actually, all kinds of food. But soon it became too difficult to travel a great distance. So we kept in touch by phone and email. It was hard not being able to be with him recently when he got so sick with COVID, then breaking 2 ribs and bruising his hip, needing to walk with a walker, and then declining so quickly. It seemed it had been only a few short weeks before that he had been his usual happy self, just back from a workout at the gym. But I do have one more treasured memory. The last words that I said to him as we talked on the telephone were, "I love you." And he replied, "I love you too." David was full of life, always on the go, ever ready for an adventure or a party, compassionate and eager to help in any way he could. I am very grateful that David was my brother, and I miss him terribly. But I will always have him with me in the many wonderful memories I have of our life together, carrying him always in my heart. Hi, Mark. I'm glad you could join us. So now, I hope you will share your times with David, your thoughts and your stories. So if you'll just begin with your name and how you know David, we would love to hear from you. So who'll get us started? Ed.
I'll be happy to.
Good.
My name is Ed Shanafi. David and I met each other in France when we were in that army band that you talked about 60 years ago. And it was during the Vietnam War, and we were very lucky to have been musicians at that time, so we could be serving in France rather than on the front lines. My friendship with Dave and Jane was one of the highlights of my time, and was probably the highlight of my time in the Army and in life. The concerts and festivals we played in France, in Belgium, and Luxembourg, were, for the most part, festivals and celebrations, and they really brought us together as a group. The most important celebration we had, however, over there was Dave and Jane's wedding day. It was in Verdun, France. Dave was always top, he always selected top drawer, and he took us all, the whole band, to the best restaurant in France, in Verdun. I forget how many Michelin stars it might have had, but it was called Le Cocardi, the Brazen Rooster. And it was a beautiful sunny day. And I was just on the phone with a fellow by the name of Dale Curran. Dale was another one of our good buddies. He became the godfather of my daughter, my middle child, and he was the best man at the wedding for Dave and Jane. So he sends his best regards and wishes to all of the family today, and his sincere condolences. Dale would be here, but he doesn't. For an ex-newsman, he was with NBC for all his life. He doesn't have a computer. he gets his news from the newspaper and the TV alone. So he can't be here today. But anyway, back to the wedding. It was a beautiful sunny day, and we were all so happy to be sharing that with Dave and Jane. The wine was flowing, and the food was. He just let it all happen. It was wonderful, a wonderful day. Speaking of wine, Dave was the person who started me on my appreciation of good wine. one of our assignments was to go to a town called Nancy in France. It was up in the northeastern corner near the German border, and it's a beautiful, picturesque town. After our gigs, we played a concert, and then we played for a dance. And we all took a walk through town. We were hungry. We were going to get dinner. Dave spotted a brasserie that looked pretty good, had a lot of buzz. And we walked in, about 10 of us. There were 2 tables. And I was at one table. Dave was at another. During the meal, I wandered over to Dave's table and asked him how he liked the food, what he was having. And he asked me what we were drinking. And I told him, a carafe of the house red. That's as much as I knew about ordering wine. So he held up his glass, he gave it to me, and he said, taste this. And I tasted it, and the world opened up for me. It was a delicious, delicious experience. I'd never had a glass of wine like that. And I asked him what it was. He said it was a Volnay, a Burgundy wine, and it was just fabulous. Recently, my store here in Vero Beach, where I live, Florida, had some excellent Volnay available. I hadn't seen it much in stores at all. So I bought a couple of bottles, brought it home. It brought back all those memories. It was delicious. And I phoned Dave and I told him about it. And I said, do you remember that time in Nancy and he didn't remember it at all, but he was happy to hear that he had educated me on the wine road of my life. Anyway, the thing I loved about Dave the most was his enthusiasm for almost everything. He was just an enthusiastic guy.
Yeah.
About people, about life in general, about travel, history, and music, of course. And there were times when we performed in towns that the town fathers would have special luncheon for us. I remember one in particular in Luxembourg, where we were in a beautiful city town hall, beautiful banquet hall, crystal chandeliers, the whole routine. And it was delicious. And Dave popped up, as he usually did during these times, and got on his feet, and he thanked the town fathers. He proposed a toast to the town, proposed a toast to the people of the town, all in French, of course. He was good at this. And he was the guy who was, and then he would end it by complimenting France. He would say,
I think he froze.
Give it a minute.
Oh, I sure hope so. Well, I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Oh,
Well, maybe he'll come back in. Maybe he realized that something was wrong and he'll come back in. And I hope Eric will notice that he wants to come back in. He's the meeting host. I don't know. We'll see. Well, in the meantime, it was so good to hear about David's wedding day because, of course, we weren't there. So it was nice to hear about it. I just agree with him, with that enthusiasm for life. He was enthusiastic about everything. So, Brian or Mark, would you like to share about David? No? All right.
No, I'm
Mark?
happy to share. I'm just saying that if Mark wants to go first, that's fine.
Oh,
no.
Okay. I always enjoyed Uncle David. I didn't get to see him a whole lot when we were younger. Mark, I don't know when you joined, but Mom pointed out that for a lot of our lives, we were either on the other side of the Pacific Ocean or on the other side of the country from Uncle David and Aunt Jane and my cousin Eric there, and so we didn't see them often. But when I got older, when I joined the Marines, I got sent to training out in California, and he was very kind to drive from where they lived all the way down to 29 Palms and get me. And I went out there and stayed with them for a little while and enjoyed that. And David and I had music in common. And I just, and I worked as a chef for a while, and he enjoyed cooking. So he'd always be hitting me up for recipes, and, we could compare notes and that sort of thing. And then later on, I am thankful that I was able to school him on one thing. And that was, I knew how much he liked jazz. So as a musician, I turned him on to Snarky Puppy. And if you are unfamiliar with Snarky Puppy, you should listen to Snarky Puppy. Absolute geniuses in the music field, especially in jazz. And once David heard it, then we had many, many email conversations back and forth. And then, hey, check this out. Hey, check this out. Check this out. Check this out. So it's, as you said, he was always very enthusiastic. What I think maybe most about David is that while he lived, he chose to really live. He lived and he loved, and he did both well.
Thank you. That's a beautiful thing. Yes, he lived and he loved well. Yeah, both. Thank you. Were you going to say anything else?
I'm
No.
good.
Okay. I remember when you got to visit him when you were at 29 Palms. Yeah, very special. And that music connection. And I have never heard of Snarky Puppy. So
You need to go listen to him.
I will. All right.
Neither. That's a new one for me as well. Yeah. Oh my. Well,
Right. This is Mark Stauffer.
yes,
Yes.
I am Mark Stauffer. I'm a cousin of some kind. My dad, Doug Stauffer, is first cousins with you and
Yes.
Dave.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
That's
Right.
correct.
And yeah, no, this is yeah. Well, I mean, my connection with Dave has really only sort of blossomed in the last 5-6 years, I think, to be honest, and via email mostly. Then we had some interactions via the Zoom meetings we were having there for a while as a Stauffer family or extended Stauffer family, and I found it remarkable at how engaging and direct that sort of form of communication could be. I mean, it's sort of like for a while there'd be flurries of back and forth, and having, it's almost like it might have been easier to pick up the phone, but it was somehow just fine and good to be conversing via email. But and he put me on to interaction he was having with a number of his band buddies, and there was a lot of those that there was participation there, and there was a lot of those I just left alone. But there's a whole constellation of things that were from jazz and music and wine and food to some current events and a little bit of politics in there, as well as I think what I found most striking with the interactions I had directly with him was just talking about sort of getting older and aging. And we talked, for lack of a better word, quite a bit about his the churning, the sort of emotional and mental churning that went into how to best care for Jane, and what that looked like, what that would mean, what that would how that would affect their relationship, and I was really grateful for that, which was very open and honest, and just as well as that sort of enthusiasm for life that just came through from unwittingly.
Right.
It was just obvious. It was just there,
Yeah.
and it's infectious. And so
He definitely did. He had a real zest for life. Yeah.
yeah, and I'll miss him. Yeah, miss him.
Well, Ed, welcome back. I'm sorry we lost you for a while. Are you back and can you hear us?
I can hear you. I lost you midstream. I was in the middle of, I think. Did you lose
Yes,
me?
Yes.
We lost you. Yeah.
Yes.
You
Yes.
were
And
you were just going back to the day of the wedding. You had talked about how the band had gone out and you guys had played a couple things in a gig or something, and then you were getting back to the wedding.
Okay.
and you're
Go ahead.
no. So please pick up where you left off.
Okay. At the wedding. Well, let me hang on here. I think. Did I talk about the wine that he introduced
Yes.
me to?
Yes.
I did.
Yes, you did.
And,
By the way, I do want to thank you for telling about the wedding because we weren't there. So that was nice to hear. Thanks, Ed.
oh, good. I'm glad. And I just, Jerry Lady, who was in the band with us, he was a drummer, percussion, and he's been anxious to join. And I just got an email from him that said, I'm waiting here. It says 3 more hours and nothing's happened. So I told him that about the snafu. I sent him this link and I'll see if he comes on.
I
But
hope
anyway,
I hope he can.
I hope he can. I was talking about Dave's enthusiasm about how we would have these festivals we played, and or whatever they were. Sometimes they were memorials, and parades in the different towns, and we'd be invited. Did you get that part? That we'd be invited to luncheons.
Yes, and he would always give a toast,
and he'd pop up and give a
town
toast.
fathers and everyone.
Yes, yeah, he was great at that. And then about Jane and Dave getting in their Mini Cooper. You said a Volkswagen. I remember a Mini Cooper, but who knows what my memory is.
I think you probably are more correct because my information is secondhand.
Okay. And they'd go on those rallies, those navigation rallies.
Mm-hmm.
And did you get any of that?
No, we did not. I think they took the VW bus when they toured around Europe, but then took what you said on the rallies, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think
that probably would be true. They would just get in the car and go. If it were in a rally, they were very adventuresome, as you know. And but I always thought that when Jane recounted some of those trips, some of those rallies, that he would make a right and she would say, "No, David, it's left here." I thought it would be a great sitcom for two people who are all kind of the Bickersons on the road, And I thought that would be, if I were a scriptwriter, I would have written everything down she was telling us. It was hysterical. Mm-hmm. And anyway, one day they showed up in their Volkswagen bus in our driveway in New York, in Westchester County, New York. So that's their sense of adventure was still very much in shape. And they stayed with us for a couple of days. We didn't have an extra bedroom. We had one boy at that time in his bedroom and our bedroom, and there was no other bed. So they had to sleep in their Volkswagen. But they were used to that. I think that was what they were doing anyway. And I was so happy that my wife, Kathy, got to meet them, especially got to meet Jane, because I knew they were two of the same, cut from the same cloth. They just got along so beautifully. In Verdun, they lived in an apartment which was connected to a beautiful, you probably know this, a beautiful mansion, a kind of a manse, not a real mansion, but a beautiful townhome. And on girls' night out, it would be boys' night out. He'd have us all over for poker. And he did it up. He just decked himself out, not quite like a Mississippi gambler, but close. And he'd have the wine flowing, the hors d'oeuvres, the cigar. He was a great host. And it was these kinds of things that really kept us together, that helped create us as a little unit, besides being musicians and playing music together, which is a very kind of binding experience. He was the guy who kept us, he was the glue who kept us together in that respect, and through the all the reunions that we've had in Savannah, New Orleans, Las Vegas, San Antonio, Myrtle Beach. He and Jane were always instrumental in helping us get organized, and were there with bells on each and every time. It was all part of his great enthusiasm for life, for us, for people. I don't know if I ever met anybody, and this is why I was in such shock when I heard about Dave, who was a warmer, more sincere, caring person, one who cherished friendships like ours as much as he did. I'll miss him as well, as you will, not maybe as strongly as you will, but in many, many ways. But I know how fortunate I was to have him and Jane in my life, and I'll never forget them. And I thank you for giving me a chance to talk about my old pal.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. It
Okay.
was so wonderful to have that picture into his life for the part of life that you knew him. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Anybody-
For the benefit of Mom and Mark, who were asking about the snarky puppy thing, or had said they had never heard of it since I had introduced not Eric, but David to it. This is the exact song that I sent to him the first time. I just sent you a link to it in the chat. If you want to click on it at your leisure, put on a good set of headphones and listen to it. That is the one where, David was definitely more of the jazz expert. I was more into ska and fusion and rock and roll, since I'm a couple years younger than David was. But in jazz, we could agree. And he had never heard of Snarky Puppy. And when I sent him that link, he told me that a whole world opened up to him. So that's the song. That link right there will take you directly to that particular song.
Okay. Ed also loves jazz, and you might want to tell everybody about you and your family and jazz.
Me?
Yes, Ed. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm in the music. I was in the music business. I started in it as a piano player, and I played with the Glenn Miller Orchestra and some other organizations, singers like Bob Eberly and the Four Aces and stuff like that. But nothing big. Sometimes just a one-night stand or whatever. But with the Glenn Miller, I was out for a while. That's after the Army, when I was deciding what I was going to do for a living. And then I got a job at CBS for Columbia Records, and that started the whole other side of my life, not being a performer anymore, but being a businessman in the music business. Started my own music magazines, eventually my own record company, and then as what goes around comes around. Down here in Vero Beach, I started playing piano again with my kids. My son is a drummer and my daughter sings, so we were doing gigs downtown until the COVID came along. And COVID came in, and I went out. I didn't want to be in crowds anymore.
Right.
But we played at the local museum. We gave jazz concerts. That was really fun. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's my music connection.
Yeah, because I think I had mentioned to you that Brian is a percussionist.
Ah, yes.
Yes, this is
Yeah.
this is our drummer.
Sitting in a studio.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, okay.
Well, anything else anybody would like to share? Huh? All right, Lonnie wants to share. He's going to come sit where I am.
All
Except
right.
I'm going to move first. So there you go. Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Lonnie.
Hello.
Yeah. As I sit listening to talk about David, and the words that keep coming up are enthusiasm and generosity, and I can say that's doubled in the time we were with him. That was constant generosity, constant enthusiasm. Sometimes it's more than what we wanted, but he'd carry us along and we'd get there. The one of them is when we were stationed in Japan. As it got closer to time to come home, we were getting everybody ready. And of course, we had 2 kids and we had all the luggage and everything. Getting out of Japan was a trip anyway, because I thought the Japanese would probably be very efficient, but they weren't. And to get through the airport there was just a trip and a half. Anyway, we flew home, about 10-hour flight. Friends picked us up and took us to their house, and we slept that night. And then the next day, they took us to David and Jane. And when we got to David's and Jane, they had dinner ready, and we had a good dinner. And David said, now, when everybody's ready, we're going to get in the VW and we're all going to go to the drive-in movies. Oh, no. I can hardly walk. I can hardly see. What? I go to the drive-in movie. Well, we went to the drive-in movie, and it was Star Wars. And the greatest thing was, as new people were coming into Japan before we left, the kids were making all these different sounds and signs and statements and so forth. Just absolutely strange to us. Like the fawns, you know, they were making that sound. Well, when we got to Star Wars, we finally caught up in what everyone was saying and doing. I think it was just really great that he thought about that and took us there. So most of the time, his enthusiasm was really good. And I'm going to have many really good memories about our trips that we went with them. Just great vacations. And I miss the times that he's going to call on a telephone and he read something in the newspaper and he'd pick it up and what do you think of this? I hadn't heard about it. You know, I retired from the Navy in 1982 and I never bothered with anything except a monthly check. That's the only thing I get. So he wanted to know about the captain on this ship. And I had no idea what it was. But anyway, I'll miss the call because David was always, like you say, enthusiastic and generous. And he just was a good friend and watched closely that I took care of his little sister. So that's my contribution. Yes.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
See if I can walk.
Yes, well, you know, from the emails, he always liked to say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? He was always presenting something for discussion, whether it was on the phone or via email. All right. Anything else? I'm sorry that Jerry wasn't able to join us.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'm sure he was too, because he was really very, very fond of David. And he told me that when I called him to tell him about Dave's passing, he said he was in shock and he was very, very saddened. He said Dave was the one guy who reached out when he came as a newbie to the band to welcome him, take him around Verdun in his car, show him around the whole place. And, you know, typical Dave. So he felt very warmly toward Dave, and I'm sorry he couldn't be here to tell you about it.
Yeah.
And he's good. He's good on his feet, so it would have been good. I'm sorry he's not here.
Yes. Well, I don't know if there will be any way that Eric could contact him and get a recording and add it in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll ask him to do something. You know, I'll get him. Or I'll send you his email as well, so you'll have him.
Okay. Oh, okay. That would be great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. But thank you for sharing just that little bit, how David did reach out to him and was such a good friend right from the beginning. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you all for sharing. I think that probably closes up our time. Thank you for being here. And I think David was well honored today by your sharing. So thank you so much. And
thanks for asking me.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay.
And we'll look forward to getting that compilation that Eric was telling us about. And please feel free to share it with Jerry or with anyone else.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right. Goodbye.
Bye all.
Bye. Let's see. So just close it out.
Actually, talk over here next to this so we get better idea on this.
I mean, if Evelyn's gonna be,
She's not gonna hear you.
but,
You don't wanna do it this one because she's gonna do it on her.
no, right, but I'm gonna do it to hear, to everyone
Let's
here.
get it in.
And then, but maybe,
Well, sure, if you want to. You want to have your audio and then you see your video? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, is there like a little movie button? You want to ask? Yeah, Cameron's gonna ask a little bit. Cameron's gonna ask about the music.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming today. I'm gonna be reading this on behalf of my Aunt Evelyn, David's sister, who wanted to speak by the live stream. However, there were technical difficulties. Comes with the territory, of course. So I'm going to be reading this, her welcome, and her eulogy on behalf of Evelyn Thomas, David's sister. Good morning. I'm David's younger sister, Evelyn Thomas. And on behalf of Jane, David's wife, his son Eric, and his granddaughter Delilah, I want to welcome all of you to the celebration of David's life. Welcome to those of you who are present in person, and welcome to those of you live streaming from California, North Carolina, Texas, and Virginia. We are grateful that you are with us and look forward to all of us being comforted as we remember David, sharing our thoughts and stories about him, this wonderful man with a zest for life, an insatiable curiosity, a generous spirit, and a compassionate heart. I have so many wonderful memories of David that it was hard to decide which ones to tell you about. One memory just led to another. Here are just a few snapshots of our life together. David Richard Strauss, husband, father, grandfather, educator, musician, world traveler, veteran, sports enthusiast, gourmet cook, philosopher, lover of puns, loyal friend, and my big brother. David and I grew up in small towns in eastern Pennsylvania. The first place I remember us living was little more than an intersection. We lived in a big stone house attached to the general store, owned by our Uncle Luke and Aunt Alta, and they lived in an apartment above the store. It was near the end of World War II, a time when coupons were needed to purchase sugar and gas, and when blackout curtains were drawn at the sound of the air raid siren. However, for us, those were happy days of freely roaming around the neighborhood and safely exploring the countryside. Unfortunately, while living there, our parents divorced and life changed. Mom got a job teaching, and the three of us moved to a farm out in the country, close to the town where she would be teaching. We didn't do the farm work, only rented half the farm house, but we again had the opportunity to roam unhindered, to scope out new territory with its fields and nearby stream. David was the adventurous one. I merely tagged along. We finally moved into a town to a row house along the main street, and life in the city began. I couldn't have asked for a better big brother. He always wanted to take care of me. I think because our father left us when we were young, David was only 7 or 8, David thought it was his job to watch out for me and protect me. He was very kind to me, including me in whatever he was up to. When he was in high school, instead of seeing me as the bratty little sister, which I probably was, he took me along with him and his buddies when they went on their adventures. Now who does that? David loved to drive and drive fast. One of his favorite things to do was to go speeding along the back country roads and seeing how fast he could take the curves, while I held my breath in the back seat. He was also a spur of the moment kind of guy. In the summer, he would wake me up out of a sound sleep and would say, "Let's go to the shore." And off we would go for a day of fun at Ocean City, New Jersey. And it was well worth the trip, despite the long hours crawling home in the heavy traffic with a very hot, unair-conditioned car. Being with David meant having fun and new experiences. When he was 16, he was given a record player. Although he was always interested in music and a faithful member of the high school band, this gift allowed him to choose his own music, and his lifelong love affair with jazz began. His first purchase was Stan Kenton's City of Glass, which he played over and over. However, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. David was no saint. He would tease me, chase me with some wiggly creature, or try to get me into trouble. I remember when I was about 4 years old, he said he would pay me a quarter if I would say "damn it" 3 times. And at that time, a quarter was a lot of money to a little kid. Not knowing it considered a bad word, I innocently said "damn it" 3 times and asked for my quarter. But David and his friends just laughed, and I didn't get my quarter. That was not okay with me. So I set off to find Mom and tell her that David didn't pay me my quarter. Well, you know who got in trouble. Or there was the time our mom was in the hospital overnight for a minor procedure, and David thought that would be a great time to call his band friends to come to our house for a party and jam session. Apparently, the woman down the street didn't have the good sense to appreciate the music, and the police arrived to break up the concert. After graduation from high school, David joined the Navy and was off to see the world. Fortunately, his first ship did enable him to do just that, as it stopped at many different ports, all new to David. That was the good news. The bad news was he got very seasick. So as soon as he could, he left the Navy and joined the Army instead. That worked out much better for him. He was assigned to an Army band to play his French horn. During that time, while living in Germany and France, he made lifelong friends and met the love of his life, a DoD English teacher named Jane, whom he married while living in France. In the summers, David and Jane would drive all over Europe in their VW bus, and his love for driving continued as they participated in road rallies. After he left the service, he earned his PhD and began his career as an educator, and embarked on a long, happy, meaningful life, raising Eric and being closely involved in the life of Delilah. David was very generous and loved to give gifts. When he and Jane would go on vacation, he would always send something to us, which was a specialty of an area. Coffee from Hawaii, cheese from Wisconsin, or so like David, a 10-pound Ghirardelli chocolate bar from San Francisco. We also received numerous baseball hats and t-shirts. And every year for my birthday, a package would arrive with a surprise gift from my thoughtful, kind big brother. After the 4 of us, David, Jane, my husband Lonnie, and I, retired, David and Jane graciously and generously invited us to vacation with them, making it possible for us to visit fabulous places we never would have seen on our own. All we had to do was show up. They were excellent tour guides, showing us the sights, and they were also terrific gourmet cooks, preparing delicious dinners at the condo with the food specialties of the area. I told them it was my job to appreciate the fine cooking. We also went to visit them at their home in Arcadia. I remember one visit with great fondness. It was time for the Rose Parade. Through a friend and neighbor, David arranged for us to get a special tour of the preparation of the floats, up close and personal on the ground floor with the volunteers. We even got to put flowers placed in small glass vials filled with water on an actual float, one for each of our children and grandchildren. The next day, we enjoyed the beautiful parade from the bleachers they had gotten for us. What a great view. The Rose Parade had long been mandatory viewing for me on New Year's Day, so all of that was a real treat for me. That year, USC was playing Penn State in the Rose Bowl. Being an avid USC fan, David entered the lottery for tickets and amazingly won 2 tickets, so he and Lonnie attended. Their seats were high up in the noisy stands, so when they couldn't see or hear what happened, David would call Jane, who was watching at home, to find out what was going on. By the way, USC won. Most of the time, as adults, we lived on the other side of the ocean from each other, or the other side of the country, so these memories and times together are very treasured. David took wonderful care of all those he loved. We remember how tenderly he took care of Jane as her memory began to disappear. First for years at home, and then finding a place for her at Sunrise where she receives excellent care. He visited her as often as he could, taking her gifts and clothing he had chosen for her. Earlier this year, one of those gifts was a ceramic rose in a bud vase for Valentine's Day. His love for her remained strong. In recent years, after Jane went to live at Sunrise, David came to visit us here in Williamsburg, and we enjoyed each other's company and eating seafood. Actually, all kinds of food, but soon it became too difficult to travel a great distance, so we kept in touch by phone and email. It was hard not being able to be with him recently when he got so sick with COVID, then fell, breaking 2 ribs and bruising his hip, needing to walk with a walker, and then declining so quickly. It seems it had only been a few short weeks before that he had been his usual happy self. Just back from a workout at the gym. But I do have one more treasured memory. The last words that I said to him as we talked on the phone were, "I love you," and he replied, "I love you too." David was full of life, always on the go, ever ready for an adventure or a party, compassionate and eager to help in any way he could. I am very grateful that David was my brother, and I miss him terribly, but I will always have him with me in the many wonderful memories that I have in our life together, carrying him always in my heart. Now I hope others of you will share your stories about your time with David. When you do, please begin by telling us your name and how you know David. Who has a story to tell?
Should I get it?
Of course. Thank you.
My name's Dave Porter, and I grew up one house away from Dr. Strauss and his family, and Eric was a good friend of mine. He still is a good friend of mine all through my time living there. He moved in, I was 5, maybe Eric was 3 or something when he moved in. I knew the whole family from pretty much there on out. And Dr. Strauss, his house was always a welcome place where we could come, and he'd put up with us coming in there, making noise, doing anything and everything. And Dr. Strauss was friendly and warm, but in a reserved and sort of a sophisticated way. And he would speak to us like we were little adults and ask us what we were thinking about, what we thought on this and that. Or he would ignore us when he was watching a sports game and go. But we were always welcome there at all times. And like Evelyn was saying, the food that Mrs. Strauss and I suppose David was cooking it sometimes too was always fantastic. And a little there was an international flavor there that was kind of something I got there I didn't get anywhere else. And over these last several years, when Eric was back there helping with his mom, and I came to the house again. And one time I ran into Dr. Strauss in Arcadia when I happened to be there. It was always a pleasure to see him. He was always friendly. It was just the same man that he had been when we were kids, ready to ask what I was taking an interest in what I was doing and stuff, and just friendly and warm, a little reserved, sophisticated. That was the man he was. He was a great neighbor, a great guy to have in a big part of my life for a long time too.
here and speak today. And I know that if you know David, you know that he would reprimand me for that. He was a very planned person. Everything was planned out to a T. His whole life, ever since I knew him, and Dave mentioned it perfectly. Since I can remember, I was treated like a little adult. Never talked to like a child. I remember my favorite memory that my grandmother has shared with me is that he taught me the word facetious at the age of 2.5, and I used it in front of my grandmother, and she had to look up in the dictionary what it meant right after. He would be very upset with how emotional I was today because he was very matter of fact about everything. He would want us to be laughing and celebrating his life. And although that's what I'm here to do today, of course I still miss him with all my heart. Everyone knows he was such a kind and generous man. And one story that kept coming back to my mind, it seems very trivial, but when I was little, he would take me and Jessica, my cousin, a lot of times on a lot of trips. So we were always on airplanes. And he would put me in the middle seat so I could lay my head on my grandmother's lap and my feet on his lap. And I remember, of course, I'm sure that was the least comfortable thing possible on an airplane for 6 to 8 hours. But all he would be able to do during that time is he'd be able to find solace in reading his book. So he'd turn on his little airplane light while I was trying to sleep, and he'd start reading his book. And I remember a couple of times this happened, but one in particular, his light was bothering me. Even though I had my entire body sprawled across him, my grandmother, and the seat taking up every inch of space. So I woke up and I said, "Excuse me, can you turn off your airplane light? I'm trying to sleep here." And of course, the first thing he does is turns off his airplane light and sits there in silence while I'm sprawled out across his lap. And although it seems like such a small and maybe even trivial memory, it really goes to show that that was the kind of person he was. He put others in front of himself, but very secretly. He didn't like to make it known that he was selfless and generous. He liked to do everything by the book and be very serious, but deep down he really was full of generosity and kindness and selflessness, and everyone here knows how true that is. And if anyone else has anything they'd like to share, feel free and welcome to come on up. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cease Keaton, and I met David through Jane. Jane was in my English department. She was my mentor. She was my best friend in the English department, and what I loved about Jane was she was always logic. Everything was logical. And she was a fabulous gourmet cook, as you've already heard. So we used to have English department luncheons once a week to get us to the department meeting, and we all looked forward to Jane's. It was always spectacular. And then I meet David, of course, through Jane. And interestingly enough, they were both so logical, so straightforward. But they had the greatest love affair ever. And I don't know, they were just so dedicated to one another. And this is what I read. And so then I was a bike rider. And a bunch of English department people started bike riding with me. Jane was one of them. She fell in love with it. Then they became bike riders together. And we went to Solvang. No, it wasn't Solvang. We went to the Great Western Bike Rally in Paso Robles. And Bob and I, my significant other and I, stayed on the campground in a tent and had our bikes. They stayed at a B&B on a winery. And they kept going, "Cease, if you're gonna ride bikes, you gotta learn how to do it the right way." What in the hell are you doing over there on that campground in that tent? Anyway, and then we had Terry Murphy and her husband along, and that year they stayed on the campground. The next year they were with Jane and David. And then David was just always swap meeting, always going to the swap meeting. And so first he finds out that I'm a duck. Sorry, SC fans, but I'm a duck. And so he would come back all the time, and Jane would come on Monday and go, I'm sorry, Cece, I can't stop him. And I'd have a duck sweatshirt, or some hat, or this or that. And then the next thing, we went to the 2001 Olympics in Salt Lake. And next thing, I have mugs from the 2001 Olympics. I have a hat from that. I have everything imaginable from that. And she kept saying, I try to stop him, I really, really do. Anyway, and he had great dedication towards Jane now. And I appreciated that he kept me in the loop with her. And several of us went to lunch with her as recently as, maybe it's been a year now. I can't remember. Maybe 9 months ago we went to lunch. But he always made sure that she was so well taken care of. And I loved him for that. And gosh, we're gonna miss him. Thank you.
I'm Candace, and when we were living in Temple City, I wanted to piggyback. I was very convicted by you bringing up the swap meet, because his routine religiously was to go to the swap meet and then drop off a bag of banged up cans of corn, and he would say, "You'll never believe I got them for like $0.25, or a bent up box of Ziploc bags." You know, I love Ziploc bags, and he always brought me just oodles and oodles of banged up things. He goes, "They can't sell them in the store, and so they sell them at the swap meet, and they're perfectly fine." And I'd be like, "David, my drawer's full of Ziploc bags, but thank you so much." And that was his way of loving me and showing us love, and it was just the most genuine, kind gesture. And he would always ask me, "Are you okay? Everything good?" And he would always check in, and I always thought that was just such a beautiful attribute from somebody, because how often do we go through our lives and we don't stop to ask, "How are you?" And I would be forever grateful for him. I was thinking of like any time that we were talking last night, my mom and I, and she was saying, "Did he ever upset you?" And I said, I remember one time he got a little strong with his words over the phone, because he was amidst planning our family vacation, and he was being really difficult about pinning down a date. And I remember telling Eric, "Hey, your dad was a little rough with his words, and he needs to, slow down." And Eric called him, and he called me right away back and said, "Listen, I'm not quite sure what it is, but I'm sorry I upset you, and I hope I never do that again." And that literally was the only time that there was a little discord. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget how beautiful he was with my family and with Delilah, and he's a good man.
Hi, my name is Diana, and I'm Candace's mom, and one of Delilah's 3 Grammys. I kind of got inducted to that Hall of Fame, and it's one of the most precious gifts I was given, and I adore this girl. I thought about several things about David that I absolutely loved, and I think I'm going to save the best story for last. I love how he loved Delilah, how he loved Jane. It was such a precious, enduring love. Those are so rare. And how he loved Eric. And I had a nice conversation with Eric shortly after David passed. And I reminded him how much he loved him. And Eric, I hope you know that. And I hope you feel that deeply. Delilah, I know you do. And I know Jane certainly did. My husband and I were the recipients of many of David and Jane's travels. It was when they were in Hawaii we get the best coconut coffee ever. Deliveries. And to this day, I still order from them because I loved it. I was like, holy moly, this is the best coffee in the world. So good. And then one time when they went to, I forget that place. I think it's in Louisiana where they have coffee and they have the little muffins they make that are so good. Thank you, muffins. They sent me the mix and they sent me the coffee, and to this day I still have those coffee mugs. So I loved their travels because I knew I was always going to get a package. I loved when Candace would give me the stories of how he would leave the little care packages for Delilah. And they were clothes that he'd buy and find at the swap meet or thrift stores. And I thought that was just the sweetest little thing. Candace told me that he would always bring her shoes. And they were in the best condition. And David would come to our house for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. And he was just part of the family. If anyone knows Jane, Jane was always very, she loved her food and she was a great cook, and we were recipients of that as well, going to her house. But she'd come to our house and it was very, very different food. We had tamales and rice and beans and noodle and stuff, and she wasn't quite sure what to make of it, but she still enjoyed it. But boy, did David love it. David just really put on that guacamole and the chili, and he enjoyed it so much. But the story I want to save about David was one time my husband was working in Las Vegas, and he was staying there for several months at a time. And David and Jane had a property out towards that way somewhere. I'm not sure what city, but David contacted my husband and said, I'd love to take you out to this wonderful German little restaurant that you're going to love. My tree, meet me there at this time. So Johnny went. David went, and we were surprised he didn't take Jane. She must have stayed back at the condo they were at. Well, he treated them to this wonderful food, but he kept telling the gal who was serving them, the waitress, to keep filling them up on this German beer. Well, my husband is not the drinker, but he drank, the beer politely, and he had one. And then David would say, fill her up again, and number two. And my guy is, a little burly guy, but boy, he's, it was a little much. He politely drank the second beer in that cold stein and fill her up again. And he was like, okay, David, I think I'm done. And David was still up and going and having a good old time. So when they were done, David got up and my husband got up and could barely stand up. But David was just, and Johnny said, you know what, David, you go on your way and I'm going to sit here and wait. And Johnny had to wait for about an hour because he got pretty much drunk. So David was a good guy, and I am going to miss him so much.
My dad was not a person who made a lot of mistakes, and not every suicide is about unhappiness. Sometimes it's about self-determination, and I just think my dad wanted his final act to be a final act rather than a passive relinquishing of the light. So thanks, Dad. I love you. If anybody else wants to come speak, now's your chance. If not, we'll wrap this up. Go off to an early lunch. Okay, thank you all for being here. The end.